Which they're so good at forcing turnovers. Stephon had a little trouble with that early in the season with ball security. How far has he come in that area, and what's been the key to his improvement?
Probably just getting reps and experience of being as aggressive as he is while trying to improve the consistency of his decision making and processing of pattern recognition, which is hard when you are driving the car that fast and that hard at times.
I guess that's the challenge with him. You don't want to curb his aggressiveness, but still maintain.
Yeah, I mean, that is something we've never.
Yeah.
We don't want Fox to play slower or him and Dylan to play less fearless or Victor to be less aggressive. So it's our job to continue to help them, support them, and educate them. But those are not solutions for those guys.
And then you guys churned the bottom of the roster today, signing Miller, waiving Stanley. What was the thinking there with that decision?
I think we've been following Miller for some time and think he would be a good addition to the group, and just thought the time was appropriate, and looking forward to adding him to the group in Austin.
Coach, there was a clip that was released earlier today with Dylan Harper and Cade at All-Star. Dylan told Cade that was his favorite player growing up and someone that he aspires to play like. Is that someone, in your opinion, that's kind of like a aspirational archetype for him? Not saying it can be like a one-for-one. And do you see similarities in a young Dylan to how Cade has played since coming into the league?
Dylan's got good taste. So, I think we've seen this influx of bigger, air quotes, traditional guards that can handle the ball, be decision makers, be these versatile hubs offensively. And so I understand a young kid like Dylan Harper seeing Cade Cunningham probably again in high school and then in college and then professionally, and the success he's had and the way that they've played. And they both, not again, like you said, one for one, but have this pace that they kind of own regardless of what else is going on around them, which is pretty rare for young players specifically. And so I do see some similarities there. Obviously, one is a lot further ahead than the other, but yeah, I get that.
Looking at both the Pistons and the Spurs, both teams rebuilding in the last couple of years, what similarities do you see in how quickly both groups have taken that next step?
Yeah, I think probably the foundation isn't as quickly as some of the people that aren't as close realize. I think there's a lot of things that I know going on in San Antonio, and I'm assuming also here in Detroit, that maybe was not getting the results or outcomes or wins that people were striving for or desiring on the outside. But you have to build things in a way that if they're going to be sustainable, you can't skip steps, and you can't at times rush when you want to, and that can be frustrating and that can be hard to commit to, and that takes ownership and front office and management and young players understanding development always takes longer than we want, and coaches to be as stubborn with their competitiveness and their urgency in addition to their grace and support. And I think that it's really hard for organizations to not blink when things aren't going well. And I think that I'm proud to be part of that time in San Antonio when things weren't going as well, because I do feel like we thought it wasn't as far as it sometimes felt like on the outside. And I don't want to speak for them, but I'm assuming there's probably some similar sentiment here in Detroit, because there are two All-Stars I know, and some of the group that's been around was also here when the results weren't what they were probably striving to be.
And those results weren't really coming for the Pistons, and considering where Cade is now, even All-Star started, where have you seen him kind of grow the most?
He had some bad luck in terms of health, obviously, so there's no replacement or replication for on-the-job training. So I think it's just been nice to see him on the court and have the basketball in his hands and continue to flourish in his young career. And I think, you know, for some of these kids, young men, we probably don't acknowledge enough that there's going to be just natural progression mentally, physically, emotionally, skill-wise from 18 to 19 to 20, just because they're still developing in every part that every human does. You know, I know what I was doing at those stages of my life and ages, and so I think when you have that, in addition to these young men that are obviously that adamant on improving and are that committed and invested into their careers, you see these explosion stages of development and improvement, and he's obviously at the high end of those examples in our league.
Along those same lines, how have you kind of watched Victor take that leap into like this MVP status we've seen this year?
Yeah, I think it goes back to last February when he got injured, and I think there were some things that happened in his life that were just changed his perspective. I don't want to speak for him, but I do think obviously when you get a health scare like he did off the court, in addition to on the court, and affected so much and left so much uncertainty for an extended amount of time, you just saw a different level of focus and clarity, even for someone like him for a young age who was already pretty clear on what he wanted to be and how he wanted to do it and his investment. But there's just been another step in his maturation, and I think that played a big part of it.
Mitch, along those same lines, what have you seen from Carter, like where he's at right now, and what are you looking for him in the second half of the season?
Yeah, I smile because it happens to me every year in some way, but it goes back to my days in the D League and G League, where you have a young player who seems to be about all the right stuff and have the skill set to be successful, and the game's just fast. And you kind of end a lot of days saying, I really like him, he's just really far away. And then at some point, it kind of just comes together for him. And I don't know how or what or when. And it's a lot of times, I think, in that maybe some guys are early in that late December to February, and some guys take more than a year, but in that stretch, sometimes you'll see these rookies and it just starts to slow down, and they have these small wins, these small moments of success, and sometimes they can put them together over time, short amount of time, but those incremental wins, you start seeing the confidence, you start seeing the game slow down, which is, I know, a super vague thing to say, but I also think it's a very clear thing when you see it for a player, right? They start just trusting their instincts and stop trying to make the right play. Stop trying to not mess up. Stop trying to do what we ask. Just do it. You know, you got it, right? It's like riding the bike, right? Just keep your balance and use your legs and you're good. And it's just been fun because he has put his energy into the right spots all year, probably too much energy at times, and now I think he's starting to trust it, and we're starting to see all that talent and potential that we've talked about since we drafted him play out on the floor, and I'm happy for him.
So for some of those health circumstances you were talking about with Kate, you've only seen him once in the 5 years that he's been in the league. Is that harder for a staff, for your group to kind of prepare for a guy when you don't see him in person, you're just kind of watching the film of all those years?
I would think it's probably harder for the players. Again, I haven't played in this league, but I think when you get that rhythm and that feeling going up against the guy, like I know people always say, like, it's hard to really prepare for how tall and long Victor really is, or someone's speed, or things like that, or just how good someone is. We watch so much film. You start seeing over time the strengths and the tendencies and the spots they like to get to and the actions they prefer to go to and certain types of games. Obviously, the more times you compete against somebody, you can gain some of that familiarity in real time. But I think it probably is more affected for a player than a coach, to be honest.
few minutes ago about how the Spurs are a beacon of sustainability, and you've talked about that just here, talking about the patience that the organization has. I know you haven't coached with other clubs, but how much of a sense of, what does that patience do for a coach? Knowing that you're in a very stable, patient organization that always sees the big picture.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would use the word support, and I think the word that I would feel would be just grateful. We have a lot of friends, whether they left this organization or around the league, and I'm not going to speak on anybody else, but it's not like that everywhere, or at least people don't feel like that everywhere. And I know from the top to bottom, from the whole family and Pop and RC and Brian Wright and everyone else, we're all trying to row in the right direction. And when you have that feeling of support, it really gives you a sense of confidence and calmness to just do your job and not be on eggshells that you're worried about every single result and outcome, because we know we're working towards something bigger than every single result and outcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.